But coming back to what we were discussing earlier on regarding immigration and those that have had difficulties and are unsure about what the future leads, we have a fellow solicitor, a fellow lawyer, and he's another gentleman who I've come to know and trust and sought advice of myself over the years, Mr. Abdullah Khurram. Abdullah, are you able to hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Hello, Abdullah. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
No, just before we crack on and start having a sort of in-depth discussion about the situation, particularly regarding immigration and applications, how have you been and how have you found it as a lawyer working during these tough times?
Oh, I mean, I shouldn't really complain. Alhamdulillah, I'm okay. And so is my family. Just finding it as a lawyer, speaking as a lawyer, it's come as a shock to the system. You know, no one could have expected anything to this degree. Basically, it's changed the way that the legal system is working. Not only, as you just described in your introduction, in the criminal justice system, but also in the immigration system as well. That's no exception to all the COVID difficulties, and in fact also the measures taken to combat COVID as well has affected every part of society and every part of the justice system. So yeah, there's huge differences. Of course, us sitting in this format is one of the biggest differences that there are.
Absolutely. I mean, ordinarily we would be in a studio, we would be talking in a studio, but this show today is actually taking part from, I think, at least 3 different addresses. My address, where you are, and of course back to the studio. It's modern times, and it's how the modern world is working. I myself have come across a phrase which seems to have developed over the last 4 weeks: "Stay safe, stay well." Have you come across this phrase?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's almost natural now to say that at the end of a conversation, because of the concern that everyone should be okay and should be safe. It sort of comes off the tip of your tongue at the end of a conversation, because there is this genuine concern about what's going on. Yes, you're absolutely right. Even when you, when you first speak to someone, it's the same. So, how are you doing? And the kind of in-depth questions that you ask, which you might not have asked before, I think we're doing a lot more of that, and there's a lot more concern around ourselves and other people.
Sure, I find it to be... maybe people used to ask that before out of politeness, but now people are asking that genuinely because they want to know, are you okay? And maybe that's a slight shift in society, but be they from any background, any community, people genuinely want to know, are you well? And I think that's maybe a positive that has come over this very serious moment within the globe. But I think it's a serious change of perspective for people saying hello to each other, really. It's a very simple thing, but it's a nice thing.
Absolutely. I mean, conversations that you might not have had with people, like your like your neighbors and so on. You sort of go out of your way now to inquire about how they are. I mean, my next door neighbor's an elderly lady, and we might see one another passing by, but we've made the effort of actually going and saying hello to her, seeing how she is and how she's coping and whether she needs any help. And that's perhaps something bringing people together. That's a positive in all of this difficult times.
Absolutely, and as Muslims and also people who are in a very, very easier society. I mean, we're not. The UK is the 5th richest economy in the world, and people don't really have a need for anything here. But over the last few weeks, it has been very difficult.
Yeah, from simple things of getting out the house, etc., and to getting grocery and so on. People have begun to realize how lucky we are, really.
And coming back to the legal aspect of things, I have personally found many clients calling, asking, are applications still going to be processed? Are the courts still open? Is the judicial system, be it immigration or the criminal justice system, is it still functioning? I know the criminal justice system is still functioning. What's the situation in regard to the immigration, home office applications and the tribunals? Are they still functioning, and can people still continue their applications?
They're functioning, but I'd say they're limping. They're having to adapt, and adaptation takes time, doesn't it? So I think they're adapting to each scenario, each situation as it develops. I mean, certainly the immigration system, so far as the Home Office are concerned, and with making applications, there's a huge change now insofar as that centres for biometrics are closed, both in the UK and around the world. That's having an impact on your ability to go and progress your applications. Having said that, online applications are still going ahead. So, you still have to make the application, which was transitioned to online before the COVID situation. And as you said in the intro, actually, the court systems are also adapting. They're looking to remote hearings. Most of the hearings that were scheduled before COVID, actually during this time, have been adjourned. And they're set now instead for case management hearings via the telephone or via Skype, etc. etc. So I think it's similar in your field as well, isn't it, in the criminal justice system?
Within the criminal justice system, it is mirroring what's happening in the immigration system. All trials that required a jury for more than 3 days have been cancelled indefinitely. And those that do require a jury are now also being adjourned now, because if you have half a dozen people or more sitting on a jury, and then you go on and have another 24 people within the court system in the same room, nobody's self-isolating, nobody's keeping the 2 meter distance from each other. So it does become complicated. I myself was in a trial that ended just a week into the COVID-19 outbreak, and that was a substantial case with about 90 people working on it. And that was 10 weeks' work of work within the courts, but effectively had to be adjourned and restarted later in the year. But I think the new reality we're facing, and as lawyers and as human beings at home and family members, is the reality of now talking to each other via Skype and online and these other applications that help people to connect. How are people connecting with you as clients? With myself, they are connecting via telephone and also via Skype and Zoom. Are people still able to contact their lawyers in emergencies in the current climate?
I mean, I must admit, I'm not very technical savvy. So I hadn't even heard of Zoom until, everything that's happened. However, I've had to adapt it myself, haven't I? And a lot of the initial consultations and so on are having to be done via Skype, WhatsApp, via Zoom. And the SRA, which is the regulatory body, as you know, for solicitors, as well as the Law Society, which I think has come into itself really at this time. The Law Society, I've got to say, has worked very hard in providing guidance, support for solicitors. And it's sort of explained and it's adapted some of the methods of how you take identification documents, for example, how you take instructions, how you implement those instructions, and so on. So we're adapting, and we're able now to almost, as before, comply with instructions of applicants and so on. So, I've been putting in applications to the Home Office via Zoom and Skype, whilst taking instructions from my clients. So it is still possible. So not just the justice system, but ourselves as lawyers and practitioners, we also have to adapt to the times as well, don't we?
Absolutely. And how have you found the turnaround for applications? Previously, there was always a backlog with the Home Office applications I was aware of, always a delay with getting response. Has it worsened since the COVID-19 outbreak, or has it got better, or is it still that same sort of many months till you get a response? I mean, what should people expect if they make an application now to the Home Office for immigration during this outbreak?
Undoubtedly, there's going to be delays. The way that the Home Office application process works actually is that the application is made online, and once the application is made online, biometrics are taken by a organization which works with the Home Office called SOPRA. Their centres actually nationwide are closed, and they have been closed for some time now. Therefore, turnaround will have a knock-on effect from that. And so I don't expect to receive decisions on current applications for some time. Having said that, they are trickling through, and we are receiving some decisions from historic applications that we put in before the COVID measures came in. We are receiving those decisions. So there are people working at the Home Office. No doubt they're having their own difficulties with staffing and so on. But on top of that, it's made worse by the fact that we can't have this biometric centres. In fact, also internationally, all the centres worldwide. So loved ones that are abroad who want to come to the UK, spouses who want to join their husbands or wives, and so on. They've all been delayed internationally as well. So it's still going on, but it's taking its time, and undoubtedly there's going to be delays.
How have you found the government's response to assisting people who don't have the skills or knowledge to make those applications online? I'm talking about the 70-year-old man who wants to make an application. Just remind people, do call in, guys. It isn't just a dialect. 01924 231 083. So please call in, call us, Facebook us, give us a message, get a message to us. We may have some messages on the text soon, but call us in and join in this discussion we're having. What I was trying to discuss there, Abdullah, was how does an elderly person who does require some assistance to make an application, how do they get that help? Is it easy for them to do, or are they reliant on other people to help them make those applications?
I think the short answer to that is very difficult now. Sure. For people in those kind of situations, I mean, it's not just the elderly. Some immigrants and people who want to make applications perhaps don't speak English or aren't as technically savvy as everyone else, and they're not perhaps able to use Skype and Zoom and so on as well as others. I would say, however, that social media such as WhatsApp is widely used, and even people in the scenario that you mentioned are able to call using WhatsApp and so on. Having said that, the government response in support of those kind of people, I don't think it is lacking there. It's really the practitioners who need to step in and try and get to those people, or to be responsive to the inquiries from those people, so that they can support them as best they can. The government itself, in some areas, it's had some positive changes. There's some concessions that have come in, which, if you'd like, I'll tell you about. There's also some applications that have become softer, easier, which also we can explore, if you like.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can hear about, because people want to know this actually, what are the new concessions that the Home Office have made regarding applications for state and applications in relation to, is there a second tier? Is it easier now to get an application in with timelines and so on? Please tell us how the Home Office is helping people who are stuck at home get those applications in.
Yeah, so actually, that's a very good question, because there is a group of people who faced immense difficulties, which was people who had come here perhaps as visitors or under other categories, whose leave was due to expire or was expiring between January and now. For those people, what the Home Office has said is that they're going to give a concession, so that if your leave was due to expire between 24th of January and 31st of May, you will receive an extension of that leave until the 31st of May, and that may well also be extended further on. Those people who can't leave the country, for example, and would otherwise have become overstayers or illegal in this country. So one concession that's come out of this, which historically started with those people who needed to return to China back in the Wuhan initial outbreak time, and then developed into a concession in April, which has now developed into this new concession, which has gone to the 31st of May, in which you need to complete an online form, which isn't very complex, and submit it back to the Home Office so that you can get an extension until the 31st of May, and you don't become illegal, and you don't get fall into a trap of becoming an overstayer, or perhaps having bans for future applications and so on. So it's a way of safeguarding your position.
Absolutely.
In response to the other question that you said, for switching, for example, for those people who have would otherwise have required to return abroad and reapply to come under a different category, there is an easing of restrictions, so that people who would have otherwise had to go back and apply from there are now able to switch whilst in country into different categories, and the Home Office has also given guidance in relation to this. Interestingly, just while we're talking about this subject, you mentioned prisons, and so I'd like to also mention immigration detention centres at this stage. Detention centres are still there; they're still functioning. However, the Home Office are reducing the number of people who have been detained. I think there was a High Court case not long ago which said that it had reduced. I'd like to also mention immigration detention centres at this stage. Having said that, detaining people